First, let's kind of go back in church history, because there's something that scholars, church historians have expressed their theology of justification in the early church, particularly within the era of Augustine and onward, by demonstrating that there is a distinction between the term justification as it is used in Greek and the term that is translated for justification in Latin. And the distinction between these two terms is, in Greek, the term is a legal term. It is about a forensic declaration. It's something that happens in a courtroom kind of setting. But in the way that it's translated in Latin, we have the Latin Vulgate, and the Western Church pretty much exclusively just uses the Latin translation through the Vulgate of Jerome and later editions of the Vulgate, as well as there are many different versions of the Vulgate. But what you have there is, in the most influential Western figure in the church, who is St. Augustine, St. Augustine is not able to read Greek. He is using Latin. And because he's using Latin, when he sees this language of justification in Paul, he understands it in the Latin sense of the term that's being used, which is basically to say that one is made righteous. So in the Augustinian understanding, we are made righteous by faith. And it has this connotation of being inherently made righteous rather than legally declared innocent or legally declared just or in the right or not guilty. So generally historians, and you can look at someone like Alistair McGrath, he has worked the history of the doctrine of justification, and he demonstrates that this is where things kind of went in that transformative understanding of justification direction in Augustine. And then that idea dominates the medieval church afterward. Augustine is going to be a huge influence on the Reformation in so many ways, but it is going to be argued that even though his theology was so influential and impactful, especially in his emphasis on salvation by grace rather than human works or human effort in the Pelagian controversy, he doesn't explain justification in the way that the reformers would later understand it with the rise of the Renaissance, humanist movements where people are going back to the sources of the text itself, looking at what is the original translation, what does the original text say as opposed to what does the translation say. And when we get back to that original text, we find that it has this forensic legal meaning. I make the argument that there is a forensic understanding of justification in many of the fathers. Other scholars have argued the same thing, and that there is something that is more like a Reformation doctrine of justification. You can see basically all of the little pieces of what becomes the Reformation doctrine of justification, at least somewhere within the early church prior to Augustine. That doesn't mean they're all there for every father, but you see all of the little pieces there at different points. So there is a shift with Augustine, at least in that era, and it's just the nature of using the Latin rather than Greek, that there are going to be nuances of terms that are going to be understood differently.